Everyday sandwich bread can be good for a lot of things. But really, why wouldn't you want to kick it up a notch and make something a little bit better? Some sort of whole wheat bread that you can make at home in just a little bit of time without much work and get so many more flavors, nutrients, enrichment out of it. That's what we're going to do today. Some whole wheat sandwich or roll bread using just a few ingredients like the ones you see here. We're able to use things like whole wheat and wheat bran to put a lot of nutrients back into the bread that's taken out when you're only using a standard white flour. Now, the first thing that's important to know when you're making your own bread is that recipes don't really matter with the amounts, but it's really a ratio between water and flour that you need to pay attention to. You can scale these up or down as you need. For sandwich bread or a roll, we're talking about a 60 to 65% hydration ratio, meaning that if the flour weight that you're using is 100%, then you need to use about 60 to 65% of that weight in water that you add to it. So for this recipe, I'm making a smaller loaf just for a demonstration here that starts off with 150 grams of warm water. You can see that I've added it here, and I'll add 1 packet of quick rise yeast to that. That's different than rapid rise, that's different than a slow rise. What we mean here by quick rise yeast is that it's going to work quickly, like the name implies, but it doesn't need to bloom necessarily. That's the difference between a quick rise and a rapid rise if you're ever curious about it. To that, we'll add a little bit of sugar in the form of honey. In this case, I like using honey better than that refined natural sugar, especially when we're going for a whole wheat bread. All that whole wheat works really well. So you do let that sit for a couple minutes, although you don't have to. And you can see the yeast starting to work away in that warm, but not hot, water. Yeast starts to die off once you hit about 160 plus degrees Fahrenheit. So to this 150 grams of water, we're going to add 115 grams of white bread flour. Now, this is different than AP flour. This has a little bit more gluten into it that will help the bread develop its structure and work. Now 115 grams is just half the amount of flour that we're going to use. Remember, we're looking for a flour that's 100% plus another 60 to 65% liquid. So to that 115, if you do the math, we'll add another 115 of whole wheat flour. So we're up to 230 grams of flour. We'll compare that to the, again, 150 grams. We're talking about the ratios here. You want your ratio to be 60% water, 65% water to 100% of the amount of flour that you're using. So once you have all this figured out using your simple bread scale here, you can tear it out, reset it to 0, and just keep adding the amounts of flour that you want. Here we're also adding in some wheat bran, just for additional flavor, texture, nutrition, and of course it helps a little bit with the digestion too. It doesn't take it over. It's not like eating a bowl of bran flakes or something like that for sure, but it does help the color, the flavor, the taste that we're going for. Last, just a little pinch of salt to help everything come out. Not a whole lot, just about a tablespoon's worth. That's about 2 grams or so. And that's it. Simple bread made with straightforward ingredients. Now with the hand of a stand mixer, we're going to let all this come together, mix up, and incorporate. This will take about 5 minutes or so using just a basic stand mixer setup that you have here. In the interest of time, of course, I've sped this up, but what we're looking at in total is running this on a speed of 3 or 4 for about 5 to 7 total minutes. You'll notice here that I had to stop partway through the process just to kind of help some of that flour that worked its way up on the side. I'd use a spatula or something like that to knock it down, but here I was kind of in a hurry and just went in there with my fingers and helped to incorporate that back in. But as far as the hand kneading goes, that's really about it. We will let the machine do the rest of the work. Now this process is very different than how commercial breads make it. Usually a sandwich bread that you buy in a store, it's what's known as a Pullman bread. They're named after the Pullman trains that used to be popular back in the day when they made these perfectly round breads that were highly refined with the intention of, being dramatic, trying to make traveling on a train an experience. And you can still buy Pullman loaf tins. They're out there and they're available. But when commercial bakeries took over, especially with the highly refined white breads that they put into, we lost a lot of the nutrition. They were able to add a lot more water, making it a real spongy texture. What we have here with this bread is going to be more dense. It doesn't mean it's hard, it doesn't mean it's like a brick or anything like that, but it makes it taste more like a real bread, as opposed to just a packet of air or sponge or something that you could grab and tear into a little ball. Once we've done the initial kneading of the dough with the machine, we're going to leave it in its bowl that we mixed it in, cover it in saran wrap, and we're going to let it proof for about an hour. Now, depending on the weather, you could leave this on the countertop. I'm doing this when it's a little colder out, so I actually put it in an oven that I've warmed up just a little bit. Give it a head start. So after an hour, you'll notice that it hasn't quite doubled in size like you might hear a lot of bread recipes do. That's because we're using a denser set of flours here, plus the wheat grain. It is proofed. It has increased in size, but not quite double. So when we're in the second stage of the process where we punch it down, I'm going to form it into a ball, a boule, if you're thinking about it in the French term. And you'll notice that it is fairly small. One, because I did make a smaller loaf, but two, because it is a denser set of flour, so it's no big deal. Work it by hand into a ball like that. And what I'm going to do is let it do its second proof in a Dutch oven. That Dutch oven, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of cornmeal on the bottom. That's going to help prevent it from sticking while it's baking. And then for the second proof, I'll make sure that my boule's tight on the bottom there. Nice, tight, firm, round skin. And place it in the center of that Dutch oven. Cover it with a lid, and we'll let it set up and proof in there for its second rise. This time, about half an hour or 45 minutes while you preheat your oven. So after the oven has preheated, about 30 minutes later, check on it, you'll notice that it has risen again. Like I said before, it's not going to fully double in size, but you'll know that it's unproofing when you can lightly press on it with your finger and it's going to spring back. If you press on it and nothing happens, it's underproofed. If you press on it and it totally collapses, it's overproofed. But what we have right here is perfect. So, the final set of preparations for this, we're going to cut some steam vents just using a simple pair of scissors and throw it into a 425 degree preheated oven. Now as soon as that goes in there, I'm going to knock down the temperature to 400 degrees right away and let it cook for an initial 15 or 20 minutes. At that time, I'll have removed the lid after 15 or 20 minutes. Check the temperature and see where it's at. I don't know if you can see my thermometer there, but sticking it right in, we're at about 174, 175 degrees. That's too low. What we're looking for is a temperature of at least 200, but not more than 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So after a few more minutes, we'll check it again, and we'll see that we're right there at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just where we want it. Now your temperatures should stay around 425 to 400 degrees in the oven. The time it's going to take will vary depending on the size of your loaf. So you'll play it by ear. As you get used to baking and doing this recipe, you'll get a better feel for how it goes. But it's usually going to take at least half an hour, probably more like 45 minutes or even an hour for larger loaves. Now comes the hard part, because you have to let this rest. Don't cut into it right away straight out of the oven because it'll still look doughy. If you let it set for 45 minutes, cool down on its own, what you're going to have is a great loaf. Again, smaller one because we used a smaller portion, a smaller amount of ingredients. but your loaves will look just the same. This is enough to probably make 3 or 4 standard size sandwiches with. It's good for serving for one meal for a family of 4 or you and 3 friends, however you want to do it. But it's just as simple as that. A nutritious, hearty, whole wheat bread, way better for sandwiches than the white Wonder Bread stuff, especially if you're using a denser meat that you're eating your sandwich with, like this brisket here. But it's simple, it's straightforward, it's something you can do, and you can modify this recipe to use however you want. Just remember the hydration ratios, and that's it.